This is my office here, it's not yours. And we're trying to promote your stupid brand. So if you want to hang around and promote that, we'll do that with you. But you better start answering some questions. And if you don't, you can piss off out of the studio. Well, whoa, what? It's hilarious. You two are arguing over who was going to drink my coffee when we left. I was like, wow, how is that happening? What? The guys in front of me at the X-ray machine putting through guns, ammo, bloody hand grenades. I'm thinking, what are you looking for, mate? Like, seriously. I'm waiting for him to take out my nail clippers. Oh, not with these, mate. Nah.
Lehmo, welcome to the Out of Interest podcast. Firstly, I would like to... I say this to a lot of the guests, but it's an absolute honor to have you on because I've been watching you, listening to you since I was born, basically.
Yep, same.
Because you've been in the industry since '94.
Yeah, well, I did my first ever... Hello, Ali and Muzza, by the way. Lovely to be with you in this beautiful Out of Interest podcast studio, just by the way.
It's very nice, isn't it?
I've done a lot of podcasts over the years, and for... Can I call it a homemade studio?
Yep.
Yeah,
and for a homemade studio, this is magnificent. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I did my first ever gig in 1993.
1993.
The 1st of December 1993, so it's coming up on 30 years this year since my first ever gig.
Oh.
But I was an accountant and a comedian at the same time for 7 years.
Which is very common for comedians. Because we had Dilruk and he was in the same situation.
Well, it's funny you say that because for years people laugh, right? They go, oh yeah, the natural move from accounting to comedy, you know.
Yeah.
And I was the only one for years. There was a Scottish guy called Fred McCauley.
Right. Okay.
Who was the only other one I knew of. And then along came Dilruk. And I think Nazim sometimes says he was an accountant.
Yes.
But I'm not sure how serious he was about it. And then Seren, whose surname I'm just forgetting right now, a comic from Sydney, he was an accountant as well, but a proper one. Okay. Like Dylan myself, yeah.
Right. So you were a proper accountant.
I was a chartered accountant for 10
Insolvency
years.
accountant.
Insolvency, yeah, that's right. So if you look at the economy now, right, and interest rates are going up and everyone's freaking out. I mean, what are interest rates now? Do you guys know off the top of your head? Like 4% or something?
The Reserve Bank rate
around that
5 a bit.
And you get a home loan for what, 6% now or something like 6.5%?
Yeah.
In 1991, when I first got my job in insolvency, interest rates are 18%.
Jeez.
Right?
Well.
So it was a good time to be in insolvency.
Plenty of business.
We were busy, man. We were so busy. Businesses were going broke everywhere. I mean, I shouldn't be laughing. It's not funny. But that's what I was working in insolvency. No one was ever happy to see me. Yeah. If I arrived at your business, that was a bad day.
That was a bad day.
It's game over. So what made you get into comedy? Obviously, accounting is quite boring, depressing sometimes.
Yeah.
How'd you become a funny man?
Well, I grew up in country South Australia, right?
Okay.
In a big family of 5 kids, so 7 of us in the house, and I was the youngest, so I was always looking for attention. Mm-hmm. Comedians are often the youngest,
yes.
So like overrepresented by the
Uh-huh.
youngest in the family, right? And I think it's because the youngest is always looking for attention, right? So I became in our house a bit of a clown and a joke teller in the house, right? Mm. And they laughed along just because I was younger than everyone and whatever. But then at our local football club, which is where the community comes together in the country, really important sort of focal point for the country. Because you got to remember as well, this is back before, there was no internet. We had 2 television stations. That was it, Mm-hmm. So there was very little outside influence. It was all what was in your immediate area. So that community was really important because it was all you had. So everyone went to the local footy club every Saturday or every second Saturday when we had a home game. And there I would tell jokes to people. So the adults would be drinking, right? And they'd all be getting blind because that was also the culture I grew up in, was to drink heaps. Australia, right? And so I'd just walk around to groups of adults drinking and tell jokes. And they'd laugh at them. And I also never forgot jokes either. I had this uncanny ability to just never forget a joke.
Mm-hmm. You still like that?
Yeah, so I would just walk around telling jokes. So I kind of enjoyed, from a young age, getting a laugh. That appealed to me. But I never, ever thought that I would become a comedian. Because another byproduct of the area I grew up in South Australia is you're taught fairly early to kill your dreams.
Okay. Right.
Don't, because dreaming big is getting ahead of yourself.
Okay.
Right? You know what I mean? So don't dream too big, right? Don't turn into a big head.
Be
right?
realistic.
You just, yeah. You aim low,
Yeah.
Just be an accountant.
and if you get that, keep your head down. Don't be noticed. That's the kind of environment I grew up in. So then, I never thought about becoming a comedian. I just enjoyed telling jokes. Then I went to uni, studied accounting, because my dad's true story. My dad's accountant had a good car. Dad said, look, he must have money. You should be an accountant. It seemed like a really sensible profession from my dad's perspective. So I started studying accounting. But still, this whole time I enjoyed telling jokes. And then I joined a football club, the Adelaide University Football Club in the Amateur League. And they had this Saturday night presentation. And they had like 10 teams. So it was a massive presentation. It would go for an hour. And they kind of clocked me as someone who liked telling jokes. So they got me to start doing the presentations. So I'd do that every Saturday. And we'd sing songs and, people would have to scull beers and all this stuff. And it was just really fun. And I loved doing that. But again, still never thought that it was a career thing or something I could do. And then, so the next phase from that is me and some friends started going to a comedy club in Adelaide at a place called Bolt's Cafe on Rundle Street just to watch comedy shows. And this was in 1993, and we went about 4 weeks in a row, and we just loved the show. It was blowing my mind to see live comedy. I'd never seen live comedy before, right? And one week, a friend of mine, her name's Anne-Marie, without me knowing, she just went and wrote my name down to perform the next week.
Oh, no way. Okay.
And she came up to me and she said, hey, you're on next week. I said, what are you talking about? She said, I just put your name down. You're on. And I went, shit. So then but I was kind of excited by the prospect of it. So I went away and wrote a routine, 5 minutes, and I went back, I learned it and went back and performed it the next Thursday. And it killed. Okay. Bizarrely, for my first ever routine. I can still remember it. It was about the routine. Like, I had a beginning, middle, and an end. It was a real story. I had a great punchline at the end. But it was about dating a girl, when you first start dating a girl, and how you don't fart in front of her, and how you hold your farts in. Right. So my first ever routine. So it was about holding farts in, and then how much stress that caused for me and my flatmate, our housemates, because they were all holding their farts in as well around the girl. And then she'd leave, and we'd all fart for days while she was gone. And then the punchline at the end of the routine was that one night I farted in front of her in bed, and I apologised, and she says, why are you apologising? You've been farting in your sleep since we first met. So I'd always been doing it. So I really stand by it as, I know they're fart jokes, but it really did have a beginning, middle, and an end. Like, it was a well-structured 5 minutes of material.
And it worked. That's what matters. It worked.
It worked. That is what matters.
Everyone can relate to that, though.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what matters. And it just gave me this buzz that I'd never felt before. It was electric.
Yeah.
And I was just hooked in that moment. I was like, this is my thing. I've found it. This is what I'm going to do forever.
That's amazing.
But I never ever thought long term about it. Like, to me, it was just a thing I knew I wanted to do forever. And that was the end of my thinking about it. I didn't think, I'm going to take this angle here, and I'm going to get into movies there, or I want to train for radio there or that. It was just, I just want to stand on stage and tell jokes. I don't care about the money. I don't care about anything else. That's all I want to do. Whereas I think, and that was kind of, Will Anderson said a great thing recently where he said, back in the 90s when we all started doing comedy, to us, it was kind of like running away to the circus. Like, it was this crazy alternative career, and that was it. We just go, this is just fun. We just get up on stage, we hang out with our friends, whereas I think comedy now is a real well-considered career option for people.
It's very commercial now.
It's very commercial. And, comedians will go, when they go to Raw Comedy to do their first ever gigs, they'll be thinking about, right, I'm going to set up a YouTube channel, and I'm going to have my Insta Reels, and I'm going to have my TikTok account, and I'm going to all this stuff. Yeah. We never, back in the day, thought about any of that. It was just, all I want to do is stand on stage and tell jokes, and that's it. But it's a different world now with all the social media platforms and everything else. So I was bitten by the bug, and that was it. And then, but because I was an accountant and conservative by nature, I thought I've got to stay in my day job and save up money so I can quit and pursue accounting. Pursue comedy. But because I was such a terrible accountant, I just never saved any money. And then eventually I went, I just have to quit this job. So I quit my job with like no money in the bank because I was a terrible accountant and terrible at saving money. So I just quit and I was broke, but it didn't matter. I was a full-time comedian then. And that was in 2001.
Uh-huh.
When did you start commercializing it?
Well, I'd gotten good though in the 7 years that I was a comedian and an accountant.
Okay.
I'd gotten good at it. So when I did quit, I was able to get paid for it, pretty much straight away. But it still wasn't a lot of money back then. I think in my first full year, I earned like $13,000 or something.
Jeez.
And I was 32.
Oh, damn.
What do you reckon my parents thought of that career change? Lucky I didn't have a girlfriend at the time. She would have been furious.
Didn't get disowned though, I'm assuming.
But it turned around pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I got, in 2003, I got offered a job in breakfast radio. So
Yeah.
it was literally 2 years later and it all started to fall into place.
The big break. Yeah.
And here we are today. And all of this,
Led to this.
everything I've done has led
To this-
to the Out of Interest
Exactly.
podcast.
The epitome of it. That's it. Gets there.
With you guys.
Now, you hold a Guinness World, or you held a Guinness World
Correct,
Record
yes.
for the most number of jokes told in an hour.
Yep.
That was 500 and something.
49.
549 jokes in an hour. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
It's a lot of jokes, yeah. And it took, but I'll tell you what, you'd be surprised. Because I looked at that and I went, there's no way I can, the record was 499. I thought, there's no way I can remember 500 jokes. But you really surprise yourself. Once you start learning them, how quickly they just seep into you.
So how do you go about memorizing that? Now, just a fun fact. So I've memorized the Islamic holy book. It's in Arabic, the Quran. I've memorized the whole thing. And
Right.
the memorization process for me was just read the words and repeat them until you've memorized it, and then add on more. So a few
Right.
phrases become a sentence becomes a paragraph becomes a page, and you build on from there. Is
Yes.
that how you do it, or
That is how I learn scripts when I'm acting, like that. So I'll try and remember. Let's say there's 3 sentences in one bit of dialogue for me. That's how I'll do it. If I remember just 2 words, that's fine. I'll start again. And then if I just remember 4 words, the next time it's fine. I'll start again. Fine. So the same technique you used, right?
Yep.
But for the jokes, oh man. They were such jokes. They were so bad. Because I just got the jokes off the internet, right? They weren't my jokes, right?
Yeah.
Just download. It's like, So I put them into categories, first of all. So it was man walks in, and I had 20 jokes in each category. So it would be man walks into a bar jokes, right? So then I would think in my head, I only have to remember 20. That's it. So it'd be, man walks into a bar and says so I can't even remember the jokes. That was or it'd be something more, like a skeleton walks into a bar and says, "Can I have a pint?" And you better get me a mop with that, right? One of the terrible jokes I remember. Right. But then it would be, doctor jokes. I'm trying to remember. So, doctor, I feel like a set of curtains. Shut up and pull yourself together. So be 20. Then it'd be 20 knock jokes, and then 20, or whatever the categories were.
Yeah.
So then once I'd done that, 20 times 20 is 400, right? So I thought, well, I just have to remember 20 categories, right? I thought that's my challenge.
Yeah.
And then a separate challenge is to remember the 20 under each category. So just mentally, to me, that was a lot easier. Instead of saying, I'm just going to remember 400 things, to break it down into 20 lots of 20 made it. But the funny thing about that breaking that record was every joke has to be laughed at to be included.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
So if you go back and look at the vision, I had fake laughers in the crowd, right?
Oh,
So
that's why they got rid of it.
Yeah, after each joke,
no.
you hear people going, nah, nah. No, the joke. So I lost, and I eventually lost the record, right?
Yeah.
Which is what you're
9 years later.
Yeah, which is what you're alluding to there. So what you were allowed on stage were some prompt cards, 10 prompt cards with a single word on each card, right? So I had some of the categories written on prompt cards on the stage with me because you were allowed to do that. It was in the rules. And Tim Vine was the English comedian who held the record previously, 499, right? But Tim Vine's record, they were all his jokes, and he used no prompt cards. And he's a very good comedian, Tim Vine. I got a lot of respect for him as a comic, right? So I broke his record, and then I'm kind of putting the pieces together from what I've heard afterwards. Because to be honest, I didn't really care. I was doing it as promo for a festival show, you know.
Okay.
Tim, I don't think, was happy that I broke the record using A, shit jokes from the internet, and B, prompt cards.
Yeah.
So I think him or his people lodged a complaint.
Yeah.
And I never objected to the complaint because I didn't care. And they were successful. So now the rules have changed. You're not allowed to use prompt cards anymore. So if you do attempt to break that record now,
Good luck.
no prompt cards
from memory
are allowed. It has to be 100% from memory. But I don't mind because his jokes were all original, his jokes anyway.
Yeah.
So, but another fun thing through that process is, so I did a show called My Goodness, My Guinness at the Comedy Festival in the Adelaide Fringe about the Guinness Book of Records. And as part of my research, I went to London and I went to the head HQ of the Guinness Book of Records, and I met the keeper of the records, right? That's his name. The keeper of the records. And he's in a smoke-filled room with a big Gandalf gown.
Wow. Right?
And the book has a key. No, it's got none of that. It's just it's a normal office. Right? And I met this guy. So he's like across the records like no one else, right? And I said to him, what's your favourite record? Do you guys have a favourite record in the Guinness Book of Records?
I personally don't.
Not really.
There's so many.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many. See, I always, as a kid, I loved The Tallest Man, Robert Wadlow.
Okay.
Who was like 8'11" and 1/10 of an inch.
That's
Which is
crazy.
just extraordinary, right? And he died at age 22, and he was still growing.
Right.
And it's such a shame because at 9 foot, right, you used to get a letter from the Queen.
No way.
Yeah, no, I'm making that up.
Oh, damn, man.
You know, how many
It's hard to believe anything's going to say now.
you know when you turn 100, you get a letter from the Queen? Are you across that?
Yeah, I know
You
that
do.
one.
That you do.
Yeah,
That you do.
Yeah, right.
Is that real now?
That's legit.
That's legit. And when you turn 16, you get a text from Prince Andrew. Did you know about that?
That
Oh,
doesn't happen.
come on. Don't go there.
Not happening.
So I used to love Robert Wadlow, The Tallest Man, and there was something about the McCrary twins. They're the heaviest twins ever.
Okay.
And I just love them because in the 1980 copy of the Guinness Book of Records, they were both, for some reason, in a promotional photo shoot, they got them sitting on mini motorbikes. So imagine these two huge men who weigh like 300 or 250 kilos each, sitting on tiny motorbikes, riding them around. Anyway, I asked this guy what his favourite record is, and he said, which I still find kind of weird, the largest ever tumour was his favourite record.
Goodness.
Jeez.
Which,
Psycho.
the largest ever tumour was, I think, 90 kilograms.
What?
But he said he loved it because of the skill of the surgery involved in removing it. That's what he loved about it. It was a weird one.
Very weird.
Yeah. Well, I think the woman weighed about 70 kilos, so she really
She lost a bit of weight.
she was shredding for. She was in good nick after that.
Where was the tumor?
It's kind of growing out of her side, I believe.
Right.
Somehow, yeah. Anyway, Google it. It's a
Definitely.
bit of fun there for everyone.
But just back on that memorization question then. So
Yeah.
you've got this routine. Now what happens if you have a heckler or somebody else who just pipes up in the middle? Does that break your concentration? How do you then
It
sort of
does a
regain composure from there?
Yeah, right. It does a little bit. Then I'll kind of, because then in my head, right, because when I was learning them, I would have 20 jokes written out on different pages, right? So then I'd kind of have this picture in my head of the 20. So if I close my eyes, I could picture...
Where you're at on the page.
Yeah, like the little 10 little Johnny jokes, right? So it's 10 little Johnny, and then I'd be able to imagine. So I'd kind of see it in my head as well, which I guess is kind of a photographic memory thing, maybe. Yeah. But yeah, that did happen a couple of times where I had to stop and go, I might have retold some jokes. Maybe I didn't tell 549 different jokes. That might have been the problem too.
How do you go about writing your jokes anyway?
So for me, these days, I just wait till something funny happens.
Right.
And then put it in my notes.
Like from your personal life?
From my personal life, yeah. So, what's an example? Well, I'll tell you the most recent one I've written in there. Let's just have a look and see what's there. I'm not as disciplined as some people. Hughesy keeps a diary every day. That's his.
Right.
Okay.
Which is like a really good way to... so let's go to stand-up ideas in notes.
Is this an exclusive we're getting over here?
This is an exclusive. Oh, God. Okay. Well, this is... My son is 6, right?
Uh-huh.
And the other day, he just walks up to me and he says... I'm doing a bit of stuff at the moment about funny things my son says. He's 6, you know.
Yeah.
You guys got kids?
Yes.
Yes.
How old?
14 months.
14 months, all right.
14
So
months.
you're...
Mine are 7 and 5.
7 and 5. So you're right in my wheelhouse.
Yes.
Boys, girls?
2 girls.
2 girls, right. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe a little different with the boys. I don't know
Yeah.
as far as attitude and everything else goes. But this is my 6-year-old son. He goes, Daddy, you should touch your pee-pee with your hands. It feels good. I do it. To which I thought, I'm way ahead of you, son. So I just wrote that down. So I thought it's funny to me. And I'll do it in amongst a collection of funny things he says. So we were at Fitzroy Pool recently. This is the next note here. And if you know Fitzroy Pool, there's a spa there in a separate room. And you can see that room from the pool, right? And my son says to me, hey, Dad, is that the spa over there? I said, yeah, that is the spa. And he goes, I just love spas. He goes, they're so relaxing. Right. He's 6. He's got really stressed out life. You know, lost a Lego piece 2 weeks ago, still recovering from it. And he goes, they're so relaxing. And I said, well, yeah, they are nice. He said, can we go in that spa? And I said, no, we can't, mate, because you have to be 16 to go in the spa. They're the rules. Right?
Okay.
You've got to be 16. And he says, well, why don't we just go in there until we get kicked out?
It's pretty valid.
And I went, okay,
Fair point.
sure. Let's go in there until we get kicked out. And so we did. We went in there and we sat in the spa, and then 2 minutes later we got kicked out. But he was so happy. It was like really worth it, you know. So that for me is a starting point now.
Right,
Of,
yeah.
bit. My punchline at the moment is that then I like him to do grown-up things sometimes. Like later that day we were driving home, got pulled over by the police, and I said to him, if you're going to drive with a beer in your hand, there's something. So I just so at the moment I'm really listening to him to hear funny things he says,
Okay.
to turn that into a little, I don't know, 10 or 15 minute bit, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. But then if I just see funny stuff as well, I'll write it down in the notebook here. Like, you know, I was
Seems like there's a lot of gold in that phone.
Yeah.
oh yeah, there's a lot of. I was home recently in country South Australia, and I walked in with my son into my mum's house, and I hadn't been back there for 12 months, right? To the Loxton in country South Australia. And so I walk in the house, I'm excited to see mum, and I've got my son with me, and my aunties are as well, my mum's sister. And I walk in, I give my mum a hug, say hi to her. I'm really excited to be home, and my son's really excited to be there. And my auntie, very first thing she says, she goes, "Oh, Anthony, look at you. You've put on a lot of weight since I saw you last." I'm like, really? That's your opening line. You porked up, haven't you, mate? What about just hello, lovely to see you?
I think a lot of WOG family members do that as well.
Yeah. But my mum once said to me, she goes, "Oh, you look like you've been in a good paddock." That's her, way of saying you put some weight on. So anyway, so I just make the notes in the phone and then try and build routines around the notes. But I got to start. I need the discipline to keep a daily diary because I've been talked a lot to Hughesy about writing and bits and pieces, and he says it's been so productive for him just keeping a daily diary.
Yeah,
because there's so many all day, every day. There's things that
There's
happen.
nuggets that happen.
Yeah.
There's golden nuggets.
Yeah,
100%.
exactly.
so.
And if we keep one in this office,
There's a lot of material.
Comedy show here.
There's a lot of material.
Yeah. I can feel like I've just met you guys, right? I've met a lot of your staff here as well, right? it was a little vibe. Like I could see a sitcom unfolding in
100%.
in this office.
100%.
Our version of The Office. The Office show.
Yeah,
our
yeah,
version
I
of it.
I reckon we could pull it off.
Yeah.
But business comes first, I think.
Yeah.
I could see who would be the Kramer type character. Who would be?
From Seinfeld?
Have you got like a bumbling sort of person in the office
We've
here?
got tons of them, man.
We've got a few.
Honestly, everyone.
I'm
it's
sure we've
crazy.
got a George somewhere, we've got a Kramer somewhere, we've got an Elaine somewhere. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
sure about that.
We've got a
Yeah.
Homer Simpson here somewhere chilling.
Yeah, great.
We've got one of everything here.
You got it's waiting to happen.
Yeah,
It's waiting to
exactly.
happen. This is the Out of Interest. The TV series is going to be happening before you know
Pretty much.
Do you want to fund it, Lehmo?
it. Sure.
Silent partner. Your comedy has taken you around the world, and you're actually known as somebody who's actually gone out, particularly to our troops, Australian troops,
Yes,
and
yes.
entertaining them. Of all the places you've been, surely you have a lot of interesting stories about that. Which one really sticks out to you as being, you know what, this was a really quirky, crazy experience, and that it's been memorable for you?
I would say, definitely some of those trips to the Middle East were extraordinary. You know, there's two in particular. Okay, three. But the very first one where I went to Iraq. So we flew into a place called Talil in southern Iraq. And Talil is the birthplace of Abraham, I think, according to legend, right? So that's kind of significant in that that's the birthplace of pretty much most major religions.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting historically to land in this place called Talil and have there's sort of this monument to Abraham there. I love history, but I'm not a big religious guy. But I love the religious connection. Obviously, the narrative is strong through history, right? So that was kind of cool. So that sticks out to me as a really interesting experience. That was day one in Iraq, right? And then we got in these cars and just drove through the Iraqi desert for 2 hours, exposed, wearing helmets and flak jackets, like body armor. And that was kind of scary, to be honest, because you're just fully exposed. And they give you, and the briefings scare you, because in the briefing, they have to give you the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So if the vehicle's blown up, and we're, whoa, what? How is that happening? What? They said, we just have to warn you of all the possible scenarios. Whoa, that's a thing that can happen? Yes, you're in a war zone, mate. Right, okay, sure. So they give you these briefings, but they said, and this, I really love this story, right? They fly the Aussie flag off the vehicle, and I just thought, well, it's an Aussie vehicle, so of course they fly the Aussie flag, but they said there's a really specific reason they do it. The Aussies had a Hearts and Minds campaign where they would go out and meet local elders, right? And they said, in talking to local elders, they all said, we dealt with Australian troops during World War II. They came through here and we dealt with them. And they always treated us with respect and they always looked after us and were very kind to us. So we're going to pay that same respect to you.
Okay.
So that was kind of nice to hear that 60 years later, they were kind of, those troops from the 1940s had paid it forward to our troops today. Wow. The Americans and the Brits didn't get quite the same reign, to the point where sometimes British and American troops would fly an Australian flag off their vehicle just to try and keep themselves safe in that. So that's really stuck in my mind as well. And then in Baghdad, man, that place, it was just wild. I mean, this was December 2005, like the war was going on. That was a proper war happening. In Baghdad, you heard gunfire 24 hours a day. Sheesh. Like if you stopped and listened, you would just hear pop, 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 24/7. It's crazy. Yeah. And you would hear, I don't know, half a dozen explosions at least a day. It's just wild. And in the sky, during the day, there were at least 6 Black Hawk helicopters in the sky at all times, and they always flew in pairs. Right? They'd be in the sky all the time, so you really knew you were in a war zone. But we got a little tour of Baghdad as well. I don't know how safe that was to give us a tour of Baghdad, but we did. We got one. We're like tourists. We're like tourists oblivious to a war. We're all getting out with our cameras. Oh, look at this. Look at the swords. I'll stand up. You can, it's just crazy. So we kind of toured around Baghdad a little bit as well. And the shows there were amazing. But you'd be on stage, you're hearing gunfire in the background. It was incredible.
Didn't you get scared? Like, how did you have the confidence to be like, you know what, time to be funny?
Yeah.
Bombs and things just going off.
I guess you just get, that's your job, you just got to do it. But your mood is, you calibrate your mood by the people around you. As in life, if you're hanging out with a really stressed person, you start to feel stressed.
Yeah.
The Aussie troops couldn't be more chilled. Like, honestly, they were like, it's all good. We're all right, no worries, mate. Kind of like a real, completely professional, but also completely chilled out.
Relaxed, yeah.
So whenever I was hanging out with Aussie troops, I was like, it's all good.
Yeah.
They're like, you worried about the bombs? And nah. So I'm saying, okay, if you're not worried, I'm not worried.
That's crazy.
So that experience in Baghdad was pretty crazy. And Baghdad's a beautiful city as well. We climbed this building called the Bath Party headquarters, right? Which I think was about 6 stories high. So we're on the roof of the building, just looking over Baghdad. It's a beautiful city, I mean, that's, ancient Mesopotamia. They're like Babylon allegedly is down near Basra, where the Euphrates meets the Tigris River. It's a beautiful part of the world. But it was just getting smashed because of the bloody war. It was sad to see it, to be honest. And then so that really sticks in my head. And then a funny story about that. We flew from Basra up to Baghdad, right? And at Basra Airport, we were getting on a C-130, an Army Hercules. Okay. It was all of us performers. And when you board a Hercules, it's like boarding a normal plane in that you check your main luggage, you carry your hand luggage with you, right? And we're going through the airport. And this is just Basra, not exactly servicing commercial flights at the time, right? It's mostly Army stuff, but still. They had the X-ray machine, right? The X-ray machine at the airport, right? Yeah. So we're lining up for the X-ray machine, okay? Before we can get on the plane. There are guys, like I'm not making it up, there are guys in front of me at the X-ray machine putting through guns, ammo, bloody hand grenades. I'm thinking, what are you looking for, mate? Like, seriously. I'm waiting for him to take out my nail clippers. Not with these, mate. Nah. It's crazy. Like imagine the guy sitting there watching a gun go, yeah, all good, ammo, yeah, fine. I have no idea what they were looking for.
It's a little packet of cocaine. Not that one.
It was weird.
It's insane.
So many weird little quirks. This is one the Brits love telling us. The Americans use a Claymore Mine. It's a really popular mine the Americans use. And they showed me one, and written on the Claymore Mine at the back, it says, "Do not eat," right? Because apparently an American soldier once, for a dare, tried to eat a Claymore Mine, and it didn't end well for him. So now they have to write on every single Claymore Mine, "Do not eat." And the other one, but a good one for the British, on the body armour, right? So it's Kevlar, which is rock hard, right? You can't shoot through it, right? That's how hard it is. If you take the Kevlar out of the vest, right? On the British Kevlar, it says, "Do not tumble dry." I mean, it's basically a rock. Do not. So someone must have put it in a dryer once. Broke my bloody dryer. So, all right, we're going to have to write it on the thing. Do not tumble dry.
Experience.
So that Iraq trip really sticks out in my head. And the other one that really, the two others quickly. One gig in Afghanistan in 2009 in the Oruzgan province in, what's the name of the base? It'll come to me in a sec. But it's like just out in the Afghan desert, and we had a massive base there. And the Aussies had had a rough, in fact, their worst month of that whole campaign. We lost a few blokes that month at that base. Tarrant Cout. All right, Tarrant Cout. And so we did a gig. It was the end of March 2009, and we were just in this kind of bar area on the base, and I just remember it just being electric, this gig, because there was so much tension and stress there at the time because they were losing their mates. the war was, people were starting to ask where's this war headed? What's the point of this? And so people were a little bit disillusioned, but they were still working really hard and they were stressed. And we did that gig, and it was just like lightning in a bottle. It was amazing. It just went off. And then afterwards, an Aussie guy who was a commando said to me, he goes, "Oh, thanks, Lehmo. For 2 hours, you took me back to Australia, and I really needed the break."
Yeah.
And it was like, well, that's probably the best compliment I've ever had after a comedy gig,
It's meaningful. Yeah.
It's meaningful. It was nice, because you just can't describe what that environment is like, because you're constantly watching your back, So that one really sticks out to me. And then the last one is I was in Kabul with Mick Malloy in 2015, and we drove from Kabul airport up to a base called Karga, and we had to drive through Kabul to get there. And it was snowing. It was freezing cold. And it was fascinating to see the city of Kabul. But also, two things happened, right? One was, as we were pulling into the base, there were some local dudes there. It had been snowing. They had snowboard. Now, you got to remember, these guys have been watching Army drive through their streets for 14 years now.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing you get pretty sick of it. A, you'd be sick of it, and B, you wouldn't be intimidated by it as perhaps you once would have been. If you've been watching this since you were 5 and you're now 20, and you're a 20-year-old man, you just be going, screw you, man, get out of my freaking city, right? So we pulled to go into the base, and there's these young dudes there, and they're holding snowballs, threatening to throw them at the vehicle. Yeah. But of course, the guys in the vehicle don't know what's in the snowball.
Something could be hidden in there.
Something could be hidden in the snowball. Yeah. So I got to watch on reflection. At the time, it was a bit tense, but on reflection, it's a hilarious standoff where you've got guys standing at the roof of this vehicle with, proper, I don't know how to describe them properly, but some weaponry that really kicks ass, right? Pointing at these guys who are holding snowballs, right? And they're screaming at them, "Put the snowball down or we'll shoot." Right? It's hilarious. But that's how crazy that place had become, Put the snowball down or we'll shoot. It's like, Jesus. And then the guys eventually just threw the snowballs down, and they were just snowballs, Yeah. And then coming back from that gig, we were driving through Kabul again, and the gunners stand at the top of the vehicle, right?
Yeah.
And a Toyota Corolla, which is, it's the vehicle of choice in Kabul, white Toyota Corolla, pulls up right next to our vehicle, like almost touching it as we're driving along. And the gunner at the top, I asked him later, because I could hear him yelling a lot, and I spoke to him later about it. And I said, "What was going through your head while all that happened? What was your process?" And he said, "Well, I identified the vehicle as a potential threat because it could have been bombs in the car, right?" So he said, but shooting would have been an overreaction, given that I didn't know for sure. And he said, I felt like throwing down a flare would have also been an overreaction in the circumstances, but I wanted to get the vehicle away from us. So he yelled out, and I remember this bit, he yells out, "Water bottle." And one of the other guys passes like a Mount Franklin up to him, and he just threw the water bottle into the bonnet of the car, and then the guy drove off.
Damn.
Yeah. So at the end of that day, I thought, this war's not bad. They're throwing snowballs at us, and we're throwing water bottles at them. This is a war I could take part in.
So how did you get the invitation to do all these things? Like, did the military just rock up to your house and be like, "All right, joining the military as a clown"? Or how did that go?
Yeah, right. So, well, first of all, they just say, "Oh, we've got gigs on for the troops. Do you want to do it?"
Okay.
That's how the first one came about.
Right.
And I went, "Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing, right?" And then, so that's pretty much it. You're just booked for a gig, essentially. When you get there, you do a lot of the army stuff. I actually know, before that first one, we did 2 days of training in Sydney, where they just teach you all basic, just safety stuff. Make sure you follow these rules. If you're told to do this, make sure you do this. You always have to have a helmet and body armor on in these situations. So just all sort of admin basic stuff. One of the ones I remember in that initial one was they said, if you get taken hostage, here's what to do. To it, everyone pricked up their ears and started listening. We're really, what? That's a thing? Okay, what do I do? They said, just do everything your captor tells you to do. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I would have been down with that. And they get you've got to fill out a form with 3 questions on it, right? Personal questions like your mother's maiden name, your first dog's name, whatever. So if you are taken hostage and the Special Forces rescue you by way of identification, they say, what was your mum's maiden name? And I'm like, how's the pressure on that test when you're getting rescued as a hostage? What was your mum's maiden name? I can't remember. We don't think it's him. It is me. I just can't remember. What was your first? I didn't have it. Did I have a dog? I can't remember. We're going to have to leave him here. Can't confirm his identity.
With all that pressure, just have a brain fart and forget everything.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
crazy.
So,
After all that, you still did it. You still went.
I still did it. Yeah. And I never, those 2 stories with the water bottle and the snowball, that was honestly the biggest threats I faced on every trip I had there. Yeah,
Right.
It was all plain sailing for me.
It's interesting.
Yeah, they take good care of us.
You're a great storyteller, so I want you to tell us this story. There's a video that I think you were doing something in collaboration with Tobin Brothers Funerals.
Yes.
And you speak about your mate Justin Hall.
Yes.
And you went for this bull run in Spain, the
Yes.
annual bull
Running
run.
of the bulls, yeah.
Yes. Tell us that story. How did you end up there? Because these are obviously, with the troops and whatnot, you did that for a good cause. This is where you're putting yourself into mischief for no good reason.
Yeah, 100%.
So, how'd you end up there? What happened there?
This is just being a stupid Aussie backpacker. That's what this... Bogans on tour is what we can file this under. So we were living in London at the time, me and my mate Hawley, with a few other friends, and we just thought the running of the bulls would be a fun thing to do. So we booked a trip, and we just got a bus from London, and we went down to Pamplona in Spain, and we just checked into this campground with like 2,000 other travellers. Terrible accommodation. It was just horrible. And the running of the bulls goes over 5 days, and every day the bulls are released at 6 a.m. So you can run all 5 days if you want. We just ran on one day.
Is it same spot?
Same
course every day?
Same course every day, yeah. So the course through the streets is 800 metres, right? You can, that's from where the bulls are released to the entrance to the stadium, okay? You can start running anywhere from the 50-metre mark to the 400-metre mark, right? Now, at the 50-metre mark are the locals, right, and the crazy tourists, right? Like, we were on travel with this South African guy who started at he was a little bit hungover, I got to add. But he started at the 50-metre mark with the locals. And what the locals do when the bulls are released, they run towards the bulls, right? Because, I don't know, they just know how to handle the bull, maybe, or they just run. So that's a show of courage or something, right? So this South African guy who's really hungover, they blow the horn to start, and he sees everyone run that way, and he goes, oh, we must have to run this way. And then he sees the bulls coming towards him, so he turns around, and then he got a bull's horn in the back of his leg, just above his knee, lifted him off the ground. Safe to say, his hamstring was not in good nick at the end of this. I think he took the season off footy. But he was in hospital for the rest of the week with that. But they call you a hero. So every day in the paper, they were calling him a hero.
What?
If you get injured. Yeah, it's Spanish. I don't know. And you're a hero if you get injured by a bull. So you can start anywhere from the 50-metre mark to the 400-metre mark. Me and Hawley, I reckon, started at the 398-metre mark. So we only saw bulls once we got into the stadium. We were so far away from the bulls. But on the sidelines, though, they make you think bulls the whole time. They're staring, going, bulla, 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 bulla. So you think one's right behind you the whole time. So I think I did a 400 metres in about 35 seconds that day.
You'd love to live on the edge, man.
Yeah.
Bull running and all sorts of military things. Speaking of friends, though,
yes,
you've been on the project multiple times.
Yes.
Waleed Ali.
Yes.
Does he look like Waleed Ali to you?
Yeah, look there, but there's a little.
There are similarities.
There's a little bit.
I've
of
been
Waleed.
told that before as well.
There's a little bit of Waleed there. Yeah.
Does he speak like Waleed Ali as well? Because I feel like they interview the same style. Don't you think?
I think you've got a very Waleed. I'll tell you what you do have in common with Waleed. Waleed has a very considered way about him. You know, I think you have a very considered manner as
Thank you.
well. Yeah. That's a compliment.
Yeah.
It's a compliment, was it?
Not
There you
like
go.
us, Ali. We just say, we just say shit and hope for the best. No way. Yeah, Waleed is. He really like. It's almost everything he says is profound. He's a weird man to be around because you're like constantly going, "Oh, wow.
Wise guy."
wow. hang on. Just let me get my dictionary so I can work out. You know, there needs to be an app like a Waleed interpreter for dumb people
It's
like
the same
me.
with him. I don't understand half the words he comes up with. I just don't get it.
He's one thing. Waleed and I are good friends. You know, and something a lot of people don't get about Waleed is what a sports fan he is. Mm-hmm. He's an absolute sports nut.
Yeah.
He's a cricket nuffy. He's a footy nuffy. He's a soccer nuffy. And he's pretty across a lot of other sports as well. And, people just don't realise that about it. But he is a sports nut. So I love we really connect on the sporting level, me and Waleed. On the political level, I need an interpreter to help me work out what's going on. He's way too smart for me.
But you're also a sport nut.
I'm a sports
Hawthorn Football Club,
I am a sports
which
nut.
didn't really do good last season, but
Oh, thanks. Hawthorn. We're struggling at the moment, but that's all right. We have ups and downs in this world, but I love sport.
yeah.
I love the stories
Yeah.
of sport. Like I'll watch a sports documentary. You know when you're flicking through your streaming services
Yeah.
for hours.
Trying to find
You
content.
can't.
Yeah.
I've sat there with my wife on more than one occasion. I'm sure everyone's done this at some
Yeah.
point. I've gone, okay, let's find something to watch. And then 30 minutes later, she says, I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
And then you
And
put
she
a
just goes to bed.
documentary.
Then I put on a sports
Yeah.
documentary. But if I'm by myself and I can't find anything, I just find a sports doco.
Yeah,
and put it on.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they're really, really good.
I just love it. And the Bills, not Bill Simmons. What's
Ben
his,
Simmons.
No, what's his name? Who played for the Boston Celtics and won 11 rings?
Larry Bird.
What's his name?
No, Larry Bird.
Bill Simmons. See, Bill Simmons has a podcast that I listen to all the time,
Right.
which is why I can't get Bill Simmons out of my head. Anyway, the other Simmons, he's got a doc on one at the moment. It's just dropped on Netflix.
Okay.
And when I saw that it dropped, it just made me happy straight away. I'm like, I've got something amazing.
Yeah.
I've got
to
content.
watch.
Yeah. We all know that feeling.
Like, do you ever finish a really good TV series and talk to someone who's starting it and you get jealous of how much joy they've got ahead of them?
Spot on.
Yeah.
I was like that with The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
A few other things.
Yeah. I spoke to someone recently who was just starting The Sopranos. I was like, oh my God, what
Yeah.
a joy.
Reliving that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Did you get the name, Rizza? Bill Russell?
Oh, Bill Russell. I got Bill. See, I thought I was Bill Russell. I had the first name right. Bill Russell, thank you. Bill Russell. He won 11 championships for the Boston Celtics.
Right.
Mostly through the 60s. But an incredible, advocate, human rights advocate as well. So it's a layered story, as most good sports documentaries are.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So anyway, that's what I'll be doing tonight.
What, give it a shot as well?
Yeah. Get onto it.
On the sports topic for a second, now you're a Hawthorn tragic.
Yeah.
How did you feel as a huge fan of the club when Buddy Franklin, who Hawthorn has built up to be the sports star that he is, leaves and goes to Sydney for a huge pay packet? Most people said he's selfish, this and that.
Yeah.
How did you feel about it? Did you ever? Because obviously you're close to the club. You'd have a say in certain things. You get you have a voice there.
I mean, I don't know that I have a voice there.
You are the most famous Hawthorn supporter.
Yeah, but they always, when I ring the club, they have a voice recognition thing on, just hangs up immediately. It's Lehmo. They've hung up on me again. It's okay. Hello. So I wouldn't say I have a voice at the club, but I certainly am close to the club.
Yeah.
And, and I got to know Buddy as well. He was a really very shy guy, Buddy Franklin, and beautiful man.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed, but I was like, good on you. It's fine. For slightly selfish reasons, because I knew how much money he wanted. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was too much money. So I thought those resources are better being put into some smart trading of mature age players, which is what the club did. Mm-hmm. So I think it really worked out for us. We won the next 2 flags after he left. So So I wasn't as upset as some people were. I think a lot of the Hawthorn people I know were like, "Oh, that's life."
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we get really protective in Australia of our players.
Yeah.
I think if you go
It's like you own
international,
them or something.
internationally, players just are moving around all the time.
You look at the NBA trading, like the season at the moment.
Yeah.
Everyone's trading everywhere, and no harm, no foul. It's okay. It's fine.
That's just how it goes. You look.
Yeah.
I mean, you compare the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah.
So like a month ago, they've lost
It's a different squad.
Durant,
Yeah.
one of the greats, Kyrie Irving, who's a troublemaker but's a good
Really good.
basketballer,
Yeah.
and they're left with Ben Simmons, who I wish was
Who's
so
the
much
trouble
better,
child.
but he's just not.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating because in the NBA, I just follow the Aussies, right?
Yeah.
And I was desperate for him to be a dead set star,
Yeah.
and I don't know, he's got the resilience of my 6-year-old. I think Ben Simmons, he just can't fight through it, can he?
He needs to work a bit on the mental strength.
On the mental
Yeah.
side. And he's playing with Paddy Mills, who's just, you couldn't meet a more
He's a
lovable
champion. Yeah.
bloke, unbelievable role model.
Mm.
If my son, I'd love my son to end up being a Paddy Mills, you know.
Yeah.
But they've invested all this money in Ben Simmons. What's like a $50 million contract? The
Massive.
money's just a joke.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Can you reverse performance base a contract? I say we're going to pay you $50 million, but if you're super shit,
Yeah.
we're going to wind it back to $1 million.
Give the money back as well.
Give the money back.
that will be something. You'll see a lot of people not going to sports anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too much risk.
You know, another part of your illustrious career in media is radio. And you said before you trained for radio, which I'm interested to unpack. What do you mean by training for radio?
Oh, right. Okay. So, well, what I said was I didn't train for radio.
Uh-huh.
So the implication there might have been that at one point I did train for radio,
Yep.
which I didn't. So when I got my first job in radio, I had never had aspirations to work in radio. It just came out of the blue. I got a phone call and was just offered the SAFM breakfast show in Adelaide, which is, kind of crazy that would happen, but that's what happened. And so I rocked up and I actually chucked a sickie on my first day, which didn't go down well. I just had a big night out the night before and just went, whatever.
I was going to ask that with breakfast radio. What if you sleep in? You have to wake up at what time do you wake up? 4:30.
So 4:20 would be my
4:20.
yeah.
That's
Okay.
horrible.
And if you just
That's bad.
slept through, do you have like a backup in the studio?
Look, it never happened to me. The worst I did was once I woke up at like 10 to 6.
Wow.
But this was in Adelaide where I lived like a 6-minute drive from the
Okay.
studio. So I just got up, got changed, and went straight in, and was there for the first break. So I never slept through. Yeah, but if you did, look, there's always going to be someone there. I hope. Is there? I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never had to think about it. But when I started in that job, the program director, he really wanted me to be good at the job. He hired me, so it was on him that I was good. So he would, after each show, he would sit me down and we'd listen back to my talk breaks. And we did this every day. Listen back to my talk breaks and he'd tell me what I did right, what I did wrong, how I could improve. And that was just that was a really steep learning curve for me in those early days. And it's kind of, I've realised since that's kind of unheard of that a program director would sit down with talent
Yeah.
and go through every break after the show. But he did do that with me, and that was really useful for me. But if you said that to most talent now, they'd go, piss off, we're not sitting down with the program director for a meeting after the show. Yeah, but I did that, and that was a really good grounding for me in radio.
Do you still do radio?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I do Triple M
Yeah.
stuff now.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
But you've been part of some teams that have gone to sort of the top rating radio shows and whatnot. What do you think makes a really good radio show? Because it's sort of like it's unlike TV and things. You sort of you know what's behind a good TV show generally, but radio is a bit lost to me. Like some radio shows do really well, and they change the cast, or they change the crew behind it, and it just flops.
And it just flops. It's chemistry.
Yeah.
Chemistry is 90% of it is chemistry. So I would rather listen to a show with the best chemistry execute a terrible idea than listen to a show with no chemistry execute an amazing idea.
Uh-huh.
Because the team with good chemistry, it's just, they're fun to listen to regardless of what's happening. If something goes well, they're fun to listen to. If something goes badly, they're fun to listen to. You know, it's all about chemistry. And that's it. And you can work at chemistry, but for the most part, I believe it just has to be there. Mm-hmm. It just has to exist. And some teams get together and they just have this magic chemistry. Yeah. You know, Kyle and Jackie O, Hamish and Andy. They have something really magical that just works for them. And, you know, a bit of talent as well, obviously. Yeah. Throw it in the mix. But to me, chemistry is 90% of it.
Is there a situation where you didn't have chemistry with someone?
Yeah, I mean, there have been situations where the chemistry's been an issue, yeah.
Any names?
Stay out of trouble.
See this, I've been doing it for long enough.
Yeah.
Don't name names. But then but more often than not, I've had shows where the chemistry's been great, and the shows have been fun. Yeah. And when the chemistry's on and the show is fun, so that makes it. Getting up at 4:20 in the morning is easy when the chemistry works and the show's fun.
Yeah. How do you guys?
And then that show invariably rates well.
Yeah, but how do you come up with the content though? Every day, is there someone that writes the content, or do you guys just spitball it?
So we would do. I mean, you generally do the content yourself. So let's say if you're doing a 2-person show over 3 hours on commercial radio, you would probably have, you know, a benchmark in each hour.
Okay.
So it's like one might be a quiz, one might be a contest, and one might be a, you know, quirky phone topic you do each day. And then you would have a talk break each in an hour, something personal, and that might lead into a phone topic that happens in each hour. And then you might have a celebrity interview somewhere in amongst the mix, and then you would have a couple of treatments of topical stuff that's in the news,
right,
as well, and that would generally fill your show up there. So you would just kind of, you know, you brainstorm with the team, really. So I would always get in the morning and say, right, what's everyone in Melbourne talking about today? Yeah, what's the big topic today? When everyone gets to work, what are they talking about? Well, we should talk about that as well. And what's something funny we can do with? So let's say it was today. People might be getting to work. Maybe they're talking about the Super Bowl today.
Yep.
They might be talking about Rihanna performing pregnant at halftime. Yep. So we'd say, all right, let's talk about that. What's something fun about that we can do as a phone topic? Okay, what's the craziest thing you've done while you're pregnant? Okay, great. We'll do that as a phone topic. So we talk about the Super Bowl, we talk about Rihanna, she's pregnant, she's performing at the Super Bowl, and then you solicit for phone calls, and then hopefully you get great phone calls. I ran a marathon while I was 3 months pregnant, you know. I bloody, you know, whatever. Yeah. You know,
the phone calls, are they filtered though, or just random?
What's that?
They call the phone calls, who they called in.
Yeah, so you would have your producers would answer the calls,
right,
and they just send through the best ones. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So they don't come straight through the desk.
Of course.
Unless you're working, you know, in country radio where they haven't got a producer in the budget. You know, it's poor Gary for breakfast is answering his own calls, you know.
But also in the country, you'd get fewer phone calls coming in, I guess.
Yeah, true. That's right.
Whereas commercial radio in Melbourne, you get a truckload of phone calls coming in.
You get a heap of calls.
You only want 3 or 4. Yeah. From the people that you've interviewed, who really stands out there? What's an interview that you've done, be it a political person, a celebrity, whatever it is, that you thought, you know what, that's going on the CV. That's something that's worthy of note.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look, for me, it's often the comedians, you know. So Billy Connolly, Robin Williams, Will Ferrell, Jack Black.
Like in person or?
Yeah.
Solid.
So, you know, they're always good. Hugh Jackman stands out just because he's just the nicest interview you'll ever do. You know, will do anything. So collaborative. Yeah. Like, what do you want to do? Let's have some fun. What's happening today? Yeah. Whereas others just don't want to hear it. Yeah. Right. So they really stand out. Katy Perry, you know, Bon Jovi was perhaps, and Dave Grohl were great interviews. Dave Grohl remembered me and Will Anderson from 12 months earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he remembered us because we interviewed him at Kudos Arena in Sydney, right? And there's a whole bunch of people interviewing, right? So then we're the next ones into the green room, right, to interview him. So we walk in and someone goes, "Oh, this is Will and Lehmo from Triple M." And he goes, yeah, I remember you guys. You interviewed me last year. And Will goes, "Yeah, sure, mate." I'm sure someone's just told you that. And he goes, no, I do. I remember. We were in the studio at Triple M and we had to rush off and get a flight. And you two were arguing over who was going to drink my coffee when we left. I was like, wow, that is exactly what happened. He freaking remembered it. Will and I were so chuffed. It was amazing. So that's really stood out to me. Yeah, they're probably the main ones. Dennis Rodman I remember him just for being a real dick.
Dennis Rodman.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And Will Anderson, that was with Will Anderson. He was in studio with us, just wasn't answering questions, was being really difficult. And then Will just stopped and said to him, "Hey, Dennis, this is my office here. It's not yours. And we're trying to promote your stupid vodka brand. So if you want to hang around and promote that, we'll do that with you. But you better start answering some questions. And if you don't, you can piss off out of the studio." And it really shocked him because he's like 6'8", and kind of a scary looking dude. And Rodman just went, "Yeah, okay," and then he just started answering questions and was really charming. All of a sudden,
No, he would be scary. He looks.
Is
pretty
he the basketball
scary.
player?
he's a big unit. He's
Yeah.
got a ring through his nose, and he's got sort of face tats and coloured hair. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So those kind of stand out.
Lehmo, it's been an hour. So what we usually do now is we start wrapping things up. And the way we wrap things up on the podcast is we ask 10 out of interest questions. Now, these are rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
Now, you could take as long or as slow as you want to answer them. So you're ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Question number 1 is your favorite comedian. And you can't be yourself.
I'll say... can I get... So I'm going to say 2. Sam Kinison is my first.
Right.
He's the first comedian I looked at and just fell in love with. And now I will say Bill Burr because I could just watch Bill Burr forever.
Yeah. Favorite joke?
My favourite joke. I mean, my favourite joke... Okay, I'll tell you. This is one I love, but it's such a comedian's... This is a real comedian's joke, but I love it. It's an Adam Bloom joke, right? And he said... Because, in comedy, right, when you're on stage, right, how timing works in comedy is when you're on stage, you get a red light that you can see, and that's when you have to get off stage. And normally you arrange with the tech guy beforehand when the red light comes on, so you know how long you've got left in your set. So Adam Bloom does a joke where he says, "My wife said to me, 'Adam, can't you stop talking about comedy? It's all you talk about. You don't talk about anything else. All you ever talk about is about comedy. Can you just shut up about comedy for 10 minutes? And he goes, and I said, "Sure, but can I get a light at 8? I just love that joke because every comedian bangs onto their partner about comedy, and that partner generally hates it.
Does your partner hate it?
She gets a bit bored with it.
Next question. Most famous person you have performed in front of?
That is a good question. Martina Navratilova, maybe.
Tennis.
Yeah. I can't think of a more famous person than that I've performed for. Yeah, no, I haven't performed for the Queen.
Oh, you can't anymore, so.
Oh, you know what? I did a gig in Canberra as a Soldier On fundraiser, and John Howard and Tony Abbott were there. I don't know. Where do they rank next to Martina Navratilova for fame? I don't know.
Depends who you ask.
Yeah.
Who has more Instagram followers?
Yeah, okay. Martina Navratilova.
Favorite food?
I'm a chocoholic, but I just love a good pasta dish.
Yeah.
A good old-fashioned spaghetti bolognese.
Yeah, 100%. Solid. Your favorite superhero?
Look, I'm not much of a superhero kind of guy, but I'll go with Batman because I like that he doesn't have any superpowers.
Yeah.
There's a superhero without superpowers.
Yeah.
So that kind of appeals to me.
What is your deepest fear?
Look, I'm pretty scared of spiders. They bother me.
And who's your dream date? Someone that you would love to have dinner with.
I think like, at the risk of being sort of predictable and boring, I think like if you could have a candid dinner, I think like a Barack Obama
Okay.
would be interesting. I think it'd be funny.
Yeah.
You could talk about sport, but also you could say, do you know who killed Kennedy? Is that a thing you know now? Is there a special area with all the secrets? Do you get to read everything? Yeah.
I have a feeling for him, you might need a dictionary as well.
I'll tell you, pause. I'll take Waleed with me to interpret.
Let's take them both.
Yeah.
Is there a joke that didn't?
Oh yeah, there's been plenty that haven't worked over the years.
Is there one that stands out?
Yeah, look, I did Red Faces on Hey Hey It's Saturday once, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of the worst gigs of my career. In fact, probably the worst gig of my career. And I did a joke on that, which perhaps isn't... Look, I changed the joke because of the rating, right? So my joke was, I come from a really small town in South Australia. I used to say it's so small that when you're driving into town, it says, "Welcome to Pibinga, population you." Right, and I used to say, you know how some towns build big things to signify what the town's about, like a big banana, big pineapple, big lobster, right? I said, well, we've done the same thing in Pibinga, so we're building a big fuck all, right? And I used to say, took 20 council workers 6 weeks to put it up, right? Now, in a club, that would kind of work, but on television, I couldn't say fuck all.
Yeah.
So I'd say, we've got a big stuff all, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't
Yeah.
work. So I said, so that was perhaps my worst joke ever. Because the whole country was watching.
The original ones was solid.
And Red gave me 0. In fact, Red wrote stuff all on a card, Red Simons, and that was my score.
Second last question is most famous person on your phone.
Most famous person in my phone. Oh, well, look, there's lots of comedians in there and footballers. Alistair Clarkson,
No way. Okay.
maybe.
Right.
Mick Malloy.
All Aussies.
Yeah, I mean...
No one international.
International. No, Josh Lawson. He lives in LA now. Adam Hills.
Okay.
Is he international? But that's about as exciting as
Right.
as it'll get in my phone.
And last question is, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Boy. Nothing good happens after midnight. Just go home. You're not missing out on anything.
Yeah.
Just go home.
That's
Rest your weary head and
Yeah.
go home.
100%.
It's good advice.
Yeah.
It's great advice.
Yeah.
Reza. Right. On that note, Lehmo, I think it's a great pleasure having you here. Like,
Thank you.
Like
Thanks.
I said, like you were, when I was bored you on
Yeah.
TV making jokes, it's absolute pleasure. And you've been on the Footy Show a few times as well, if I remember right. And
Yes.
watching that
before the game.
before the
there's
game.
a
Yeah,
lot,
yeah,
a lot.
There's so many things you've been on. I was just watching and here you are. I spoke to you. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah.
Absolute great pleasure.
It's been great fun. Thank you. Thank you. And, well, let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, 100%.
It's been
Thank
great.
you.
All the best with the podcast, too.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Cheers.